A lot of founders are crappy managers. They're great at ideas, but not good at managing people. So as you scale, you have to ask yourself, am I the best person to lead this company? Or should I stay as an idea person and we hire a different CEO?
For me and the audience, Suzanne, please tell us a bit about your story, a bit about what you do, and yeah, we'll start from there, I guess.
Well, I do a little bit of everything HR. Mostly I write about human resources, business, anything in the news that relates to hiring and firing, leadership development, anything like that. And then I do a bunch of different webinars targeted towards both job seekers and HR professionals. And coming in 2023, I have a new leadership program that combines leadership skills and improv comedy.
Wow, that's amazing. And out of everything you do, are you sort of, do you do consulting for companies? Do you work at a company and help them with HR? Or are you just a full-time sort of content creator? You sort of speak and you write content, helping people when it comes to HR?
I am a full time self employed freelancer. I don't do a lot of consulting. I do a little bit of consulting, but my expertise is in the US, but I sit here in Switzerland. And so it doesn't do me a lot of good to go into a Swiss company because I'm not familiar with Swiss law. And so much of HR is legal compliance. So while I'm an expert on American HR law, I'm not an expert on Swiss HR law.
Interesting. How long ago did you make that transition and move to Switzerland?
13 years ago, we came over here on a 2 year contract. And so I hadn't ever planned on staying here. And that was the point in which I left corporate life and branched out on my own. And at the beginning, it didn't make any sense to focus on Switzerland because I was only going to be here for 2 years. But now I've been here a long time, but I still have kept my focus on the US.
And given that you've went to Switzerland 13 years ago, how do you stay up to date with how the corporate world works all the way back in the States?
Well, it's pretty easy to do today with the internet, and I keep track of everything. I read a lot of things. I, of course, have tons of contacts in the US. And then, of course, as you said, I run a Facebook group. We have 25,000 members, HR professionals. And so I know precisely what their concerns are and what is going on over there. It's a worldwide group, but the vast majority are from the US. So we keep that all going on.
What's your biggest advice for growing these communities, Suzanne? Like, for example, let's say I'm in the e-commerce space. I sort of teach people how to create e-commerce businesses. Where would I start if I wanted to grow a big community like you have on Facebook?
The most important thing for growing, well, there's two very important things for growing a Facebook community. One is that you need to have a clear mission. So many people are afraid to limit themselves to like one topic because, oh, that I might not be able to get everybody. So if I'm more general, but the reality is that the way Facebook groups work, or the way any group works, I mean, Reddit does the same thing, which is one topic per per group. So pick your topic and pick it narrow, and then you have to have really good moderation. You need to create your rules and be pretty hard-nosed about it. When you start to let anything go, then the quality of the group deteriorates. That's another thing people need to think about. And I had, for years, my group was public and people kept asking, can we make it private? And I was like, no, because I want to grow it. And how will people see it if it doesn't come into their feed? Finally, I gave in to the demands of my group and I made it private. And since I have made it private, my membership has tripled. So that's something to think about as well, that it's not necessarily having it show up in other people's feeds, that there is some, and it depends on your topic. If you're talking about HR and we have HR professionals, so there's a lot of things that we discuss that people wouldn't necessarily want their boss or their coworkers or whatever to find out. So there's that. I mean, if you're talking about your love of chocolate, maybe having a public group would be fine. But people think it's more exclusive if you've got the private group, and you have to make sure that you're not letting in any spammers. We have 3 questions that you have to join, and 2 are things that would make sense for an HR group. And the third says new members should wait for 7 days before posting. How many days must you wait before posting? And you would be surprised at the answers that we get from that. When the answer is clearly 7, we've just told you. But people that don't answer that correctly, we don't let in, no matter what their other answers are, because it's clear to me that these are people that are not going to read through. They're just going to jump to conclusions, and that's not what I want in my group.
That's amazing. And Suzanne, out of Facebook groups, LinkedIn, Twitter, where do the majority of your customers, clients, or leads come from out of all the different platforms?
The leads come from LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
It's LinkedIn, absolutely 100%. LinkedIn is where I get clients. But what also makes me valuable is that I have this large captive audience. So I can get your message in front of thousands of HR people. And so while the jobs come from LinkedIn, the ability to get those jobs comes from my large following.
Got it, Suzanne. And can you tell a bit about your service and sort of what you do?
So, as I said, I write. Mostly what I do is I write about HR. I write about things that HR people are interested in. The companies I work for, I work for Inc. magazine, which is a general business magazine. I'm their HR expert. And then otherwise, I generally write for people in industry. So I write for a recruiting magazine, and I write for software companies that are selling HR software, applicant tracking systems.
So when LinkedIn leads reach out to you, are they sort of magazine owners where they're like, hey, we love your LinkedIn content, could you write for our magazines? Or what type of service do you usually offer to your sort of following?
That's generally what people reach out to me for, is for writing or for doing webinars. I do a lot of webinars, and I have a variety of webinar clients. Some are HR certification companies. So you take my webinar, you get your credit for keeping your HR certification up to date. And some are, again, HR tech companies that are looking to bring in an HR audience, because I can reach that audience.
Got it. If you want to sort of get leads from LinkedIn, is it smarter to create content and then sort of be like, hey, if you're interested, reach out to me regarding A, B, or C, or just create content without any call to action and have people reach out to you organically? Which approach is usually better?
The second one. People don't like to read ads, but they do like to read content. And if you're going to try to create a following on LinkedIn, you need to post regularly, and you need to have sincere content. That doesn't mean like boring content, but while you might get, there's definitely LinkedIn influencers that have tremendous followings that write crap. But if you want to be taken seriously, you need to have content that is engaging and innovative and regular. If you want to build a LinkedIn following and you post once a month, it's not going to do anything for you. The other thing which people don't realize, but this is my secret tip for gaining followers on LinkedIn, I should charge for this, is you need to comment on other people's posts. The way the LinkedIn algorithm works is that if you are just posting and running, you're not going to show up in as many people's feed. But if you post and then you go through and you like and comment on other people's posts, your stuff will be far more likely to show up in other people's feeds. And plus, and this is a tip for job seekers as well, if you are looking to build relationships and network, if you start commenting on industry leaders' posts, they start to recognize you and your name becomes someone that they feel like they know already. So then when you reach out to them, they already know you and are more interested in talking to you than if it's just a cold contact. So don't post and run. And definitely, if people comment on your posts, interact with them there, but comment on a bunch of other people's posts as well. And again, your comments need to be sincere and thoughtful and based on what they're talking about. And if you want to get in good with industry leaders, make sure you comment on their posts. They'll get to know you.
Now, when commenting, which strategy would you recommend? Option one, I have a few different industry leaders and people on LinkedIn that I really look up to and follow, and I sort of bookmark their profile, and every morning I'll open up all their profiles and I'll comment on their daily posts, and I sort of really put my time with these 10 people that I really follow, just to sort of give value and sort of maybe get their attention and potentially maybe invite them onto my podcast. So that's option one. Option two, just scroll through the LinkedIn homepage every day and just reply to every single post that organically pops up on my feed.
Well, the way the LinkedIn algorithm works is that the people that you like and comment on are going to show up more and more. If you have people that you definitely want to have contact with, and you found those people through organic scrolling to begin with, once you start commenting, they'll come back on your feed. So I just go with the second.
So being the same.
Also, there are those people with 1 million followers. I ignore them. They're never going to hire me. When your comment is one of 5,000 comments, they're never going to read it. And I'm very cynical, and I don't believe that most of that content on those 1 million people followers is unique or written by that person.
Got it. So there's like a lot of bots or something.
I don't think it's bots. I think you've hired someone to run your LinkedIn feed.
And how would you go ahead and use this strategy if your business is B2C? Where, let's say, for example, my ideal clients are people that don't have a business yet, but they sort of work a 9-to-5 job. They've dabbled on the online space. They want to go ahead and build their own online business, but they don't know where to start. So they're sort of just normal, everyday people. Would that commenting strategy, is there a different strategy for that?
I don't think so. But again, you can comment all you want. If you don't have a good offering, though, that's the thing, is that you have to have something good to offer people. And I don't mean like giveaways, but your company needs to be providing a service that people actually need.
Okay. And Suzanne, how have you enticed or made your offer enticing? Your offer to create webinar services for companies, your service to write amazing HR related articles for companies. How have you presented it away on LinkedIn where it's very enticing?
Well, the writing is quite easy to entice people on because it's the same concept. I share all of the articles that I write on LinkedIn. So I will write some sort of introduction and then have a link to it. So it's very easy for people to see that I do that. My profile is quite clear on what I do. It will tell you precisely what my offerings are when it comes up in your feed as well. And I'm very straightforward about it. Here's a webinar I'm doing. Here is my latest article on this topic. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. It would be a different thing if I was trying to sell health insurance, right? Because nobody cares about your writing skills as a health insurance salesperson. So I wouldn't know how to do that because I'm not selling health insurance.
Would you reckon more broader or niche content when it comes to LinkedIn? Like, for example, should I be creating content about the ups and downs and the tough journey of what it's like to be a business owner and entrepreneur? Or should I be talking about Facebook ads, how to get low CPMs, how to increase your click-through rate on getting like all these really niche content? If that's which approach would you recommend?
I would probably go with the second. There's a zillion people out there that are sharing their personal experiences, and there's a lot of crap posts with people, oh, this is what I learned from this ridiculous, mundane thing. And while that kind of content gets a lot of heartstring comments and likes, it's not hitting your target audience. If your target audience is people that want to increase their clicks or whatever, then you want to focus on those things that your target audience is interested in. Focusing on your journey, that's great. Why am I going to hire you?
That's an amazing point. Talking about hiring, so I have a friend, she's sort of looking for a job at the moment, and she's been, on seek.com, on Australian sort of job hunting websites and applying for 5 places a day, but she hasn't touched LinkedIn. Now, I was like, before this conversation, I'm going to catch up with her today. I was like, LinkedIn would be an amazing place to find a job, right? Like, you can just literally talk to people and industry leaders within your space and get their attention versus being a resume out of the 1 in hundreds. Is LinkedIn a place where jobless people can find great positions and jobs?
It's a networking site. So yes, but as I said, people do it wrong. They'll look for the person with the million followers and then try to message them. You're never getting through. What you want to do is find people in your industry, in your target city, and start commenting on their posts so that they start to recognize you. And then you can reach out to them and say, hey, I really admire your work, but they already know who you are. That is the important part. I mean, it's like any sort of networking thing, though. When you just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I need a job. Okay. And I have a lot of people that reach out to me that way and be like, I need a job. Okay, great. Good luck with that. I'm not hiring either. But I can connect you with people if I feel like you're a quality person. But if you just message me, send me a cold message, I don't know anything about you. I don't know if you're a quality person. Why would I use my capital to introduce you to someone when I don't know you at all? So why are you contacting me as a middleman? Just contact that person. There's a ton of recruiters on LinkedIn, but I think more important than commenting for recruiters is to have an optimized profile on LinkedIn that has things that will be attractive to recruiters.
As that person that's looking for a job, would there be a certain position of employee within a company that they would like to work at, you'd recommend them to spend time engaging with? Whether is it the manager, the CEO, the HR, the recruiter within that company? Where can they start?
If you have a target company, I would say it doesn't necessarily matter who you're interacting with, but the type of people that tend to post on HR and on LinkedIn are the recruiters, are the CEOs. Generally, your Jane in accounting doesn't do a lot of LinkedIn posting because it's not relevant to her job. So that's why you see a lot of HR people, you see a lot of small business owners, a lot of consultants, coaches, all of that. It's everybody hustling for the same thing. And there is some navel gazing that goes on LinkedIn where, I'm writing for audiences of people like me. So it may be difficult to find people in that target audience that are actually posting. Most people don't post on LinkedIn. Most people come to LinkedIn when they're looking for a job. Most people don't go every day. So it may or may not be worth your time. The thing is to have an up-to-date profile and make sure that your settings are set so that if somebody messages you on LinkedIn, you're notified so that you can respond rapidly to them.
Given that you just mentioned LinkedIn, you're right. It's just filled with, wellness being coaches, consultants, everyone just sharing, and it seems like everyone's on LinkedIn trying to get something, and it's just like a sea full of sellers. So one, how do you stand out if you have something to offer? And two, is there even an audience of consumers and customers? Because it feels like everyone's there just selling. You're right.
It depends. I mean, for me, yeah, there's absolutely an audience, but I am targeting HR tech companies. I'm targeting magazines and websites that publish business related content. They're all there. If you're targeting basketball coaches, it's really not the place. It's just not. If you're targeting healthcare workers, not really the place for you because they're just not there. So you need to consider what your target audience is. So while my clients are these businesses, what they want is for me to get their message out to HR people. And of course, LinkedIn is full of HR people. So it's really, really effective for me. It's not that effective if, like I said, if you want to be a basketball coach or if you want to, here's my new software for planning your basketball strategy. It's just not the place.
Now, could you break down that a bit further? How you said companies would reach out to you if they want to reach and get access to HR people. Like, how does that work? Like, why would a sort of company have a message that they want to reach out to just are they looking to hire HR people for their own company, or usually how does this work?
No, they're looking to sell. They're looking to sell their HR tech. And so their target audience is those buyers, which are HR leaders in small to mid-sized businesses. If you're trying to sell a new HR system to Amazon, you're not going to reach out to me. That's a completely different ball of wax. If you're trying to sell to companies with 1,000 employees, yeah, I am your person for that. I have a huge group of HR managers and decision makers from that size of company. That's why they're reaching out to me. And the thing is that my content is also engaging. You can have a bot write things for you. That's absolutely possible these days. And there's plenty of people that do that. They just have a bot or they hire someone on Fiverr to throw some keywords into a thing. And that's fine for getting keyword hits from Google. But if you want engaging content, you need someone that can write engaging content. And that's me. I can write engaging content and I have good insights. I know the industry inside and out.
That's amazing. Talking about the industry, when it comes to HR, what specifically would your biggest strengths be, Suzanne? Would it be the recruiting? Would it be the building of company culture? Would it be the building systems on how to hire and the SOPs? What would your main strengths be when it comes to HR, Suzanne?
My biggest thing is employment law, which is why I'm still in the US space, even though I live in Europe, is that explaining those complex employment law situations in a way that lay people can understand. But I do all of that recruiting, succession planning, employee development, employee discipline, leadership, the whole 9 yards.
Very cool. So majority of my team for studying.com is based in the Philippines. So nearly all our team members are offshore. Like, I think this is becoming a more of a popular thing. Legally, are there sort of any problems companies get into as they grow a offshore team where all their employees are basically contractors? Are there any issues that I guess I should look out for?
There's a zillion issues when you go offshore, and a lot of people don't realize that. I have an administrative assistant that lives in Malaysia. I purposely looked for someone that was not in my time zone because what I need is I have a public email address. So my email inbox is a disaster every day. And so what she does is every morning, her time, she goes through all of my emails, deletes and organizes and tags what I need to respond to. And then when I wake up in the morning, I have this beautiful inbox that she's gotten rid of all of the stuff I don't need. But she is a contractor. She only works a few hours a week because I don't need someone full time. If you are launching a business where you're going to have more than a single contractor, you're going to have to register as a business. And even if you just have the one, it depends on the laws of the country. And people don't tend to realize that they can't just apply their home country rules to people that they hire elsewhere. And employment law isn't so straightforward across, the whole world. Sure, every country says you have to pay people. When you've hired them, you got to pay them. That's straightforward. But how you have to pay them is different from country to country. How often you have to pay them is different from country to country. Whether you can have them on salary, you have to pay them by the hour, is different from country to country. How many hours they can work, that's different. What benefits you have to offer them, how to register in that country, it can all be very complicated. A lot of people don't realize what they're getting into. They get, dollar signs in their eyes and they're like, oh, it's cheap to hire in India, in Malaysia, in the Philippines. But you got to make sure that you're doing it legally, which can often end up being quite expensive. You'll need to, hire an attorney to help you set up and incorporate in whatever country that you want to do. You've got to make sure that you're compliant with all of the local laws, which means you're going to need an expert in that field there. A lot of countries aren't terribly forgiving if you screw up. It definitely can save you money in the long run, but also it can be very difficult to manage across time zones. Until you've done that, you may not realize just how difficult it can be to handle those people. And culture is huge. Most people haven't lived outside their culture, so they just kind of assume that the way I do it is the way everyone does it, and that's just the right way to do it. Why would I do anything differently? People often think of, diversity as skin color. Skin color is the worst way to look at diversity. If I'm walking down the street, you think, oh, she's Swiss because I'm, a white woman wearing clothes that I purchased in Switzerland. How would you know? But my culture is incredibly different. And I live right on the border of France and Germany, and I regularly go to both of those countries. Just the food differences that they have in the grocery stores between Swiss, German, and French grocery stores is tremendous. And you say, if you put all those people in a room and have them be quiet, and you just try to pick out which person is the Swiss person, which person is the German person, which person is the French person, you'd probably have a really hard time doing it. But their cultures, even though they share borders with each other, are different enough that when you walk into a grocery store, if you blindfolded me and dropped me into a grocery store, I could pick out what country you were in because of the products on the shelf. Of course, and again, in France, the products will be in French. But, I could tell a German grocery store from a Swiss grocery store. I'm in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, just based on the content of the store. And so, a lot of people will think, well, this is just how we do it. This is how I run a business. This is how I treat employees. And then you hire people in a different culture and they think you're a monster, or they ignore your rules, or you do things that are highly offensive. One of the pre-pandemic things, this has not picked up yet since the pandemic ended, in Switzerland is you have to shake everyone's hand when you walk into a room. And if you don't shake everyone's hand when you walk in and then when you leave again, it's very, very rude. We stopped shaking hands with the pandemic. Like I said, it hasn't picked up again. But in the US, if I walked into a conference room, I'd be like, hi, and then I'd sit down, right? And that's fine in the US. That's so rude here. But you only know it's rude if someone tells you or you observe, gosh, everybody else is shaking hands. What, maybe I should start doing that too. There's just those so many little things and you have no idea and you don't know to ask because why would you ask? You know how to walk into a conference room. You've done it for years. You know how to do that. Well, move to a different culture. I don't know what the proper etiquette is in Japan. Never been to Japan. I don't know what I'm supposed to do when I walk into a conference room. It's things that you need to think about when you're branching into other countries.
What's the best way to learn? Because I think it's weird. Like as an Asian, I've always been like, maybe I don't, well, if someone puts out their hand, I shake their hand. If someone comes in for a hug, I give them a hug. But I think that's something I had to learn and train because I've always been taught to, keep a distance. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. I don't want to get into their boundary. But then you're right. It could sometimes come off as rude because I subconsciously just say hi and I don't really want to touch or hug because I don't want to accidentally do something that I shouldn't. And then if I went vice versa, if I just hugged everyone, I'd piss off a lot of people, which I didn't want to. What's the solution?
It can be complicated. Just a silly thing. When you greet a Swiss friend, you do the cheek kisses, 2 of them. If you're greeting a French friend, you do cheek kisses, but you do 3 of them. Just really subtle things. There are companies that specialize in training people on cultures because most people don't spend 30 seconds thinking about how culture influences their life. They couldn't list all of the cultural things about their own country, their own group, because it's just how it is. It's just like, of course I drink water from a cup. Like, why wouldn't I? It's just like, those are those things that you just do. Of course I shake everyone's hand when I walk into the room. And until someone asks you, why are you doing that? You're like, how it's done. And it's the right way to do it. And if you don't do it, you're rude. There's nothing moral or immoral about shaking people's hands when you enter the room, but you're going to get judgment on it if you're in pre-pandemic Switzerland. I have to say, I'm not sad to see it go because I always felt really awkward going around the room. And you have to do it when you leave too. So, everything like parents' night at school, when you come into the room and there's 20 parents, you'd have to go up down the row, shake everyone's hand.
Wow.
And then you got to do it again when you leave. And I just hated it. So I'm happy that we're not shaking hands anymore. But, that's just a basic thing. But there are companies that identify those things. How are you supposed to address people? In German as well, there's a formal you and an informal you. And when you're supposed to use which one and who is the person that gets to decide, okay, we know each other well enough now that we can be informal with each other. There are rules around that, but they're unspoken because every Swiss kid, every German kid, every Austrian kid just grows up with it. And they just instinctively know, this is the point at which we change. An English speaker like me, there is no formal or informal in modern English. There is in Old English. Incidentally, the you that we use in English is the formal. Everybody thinks that the thy and thou is formal, but that's actually the informal. That's your fun language lesson. But in the English-speaking world today, we just have one you, which is one of the reasons why English is such a popular international language, is because there's no differentiation in hierarchy. Because I understand in some languages, there's not 2 levels, there's 5, 6, 7 levels. And trying to learn that as an outsider is really hard. But in English, it's just the you, everyone's a you. But you got to know those things. And people are generally forgiving because clearly I'm a foreigner. My accent gives me away every time. But if you're trying to do business in a country where you don't understand the culture, you're going to make a fool of yourself many times. And you have to be willing to do that, to make a fool of yourself. but you've got to do your due diligence in figuring it out. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time retaining employees as well. They'll think you're a jerk or that you don't care or whatever, or maybe you're too in their space, like you said. Because French people, man, they're huggy and kissy, and I am not huggy and kissy. I don't particularly want to hug you if I don't even want to hug you if I know you. But do I? Yes, I do, because I am in their culture. If they want to come over to the US, I don't have to hug them. Although the US is quite huggy. I'm just a cold-hearted person. I don't want to hug anybody.
I can relate. I can totally relate. I think I'm just scared of like getting in people's space and making them feel uncomfortable. So I remove any anxiety and just put my hand up and say hi and see what happens then.
There you go. That's a good plan.
So, for example, with your executive administrator from Malaysia, is it as simple as just like creating a paper contract, sending her money through TransferWise, PayPal each month, use a sort of hourly tracking thing? Or is there some legal rules that you have to follow, as you mentioned earlier? Does it have to be that complicated?
It doesn't have to be complicated. She works as an independent contractor. She's responsible for all of her stuff in Malaysia, and I don't worry about it. I originally hired her through freelancer.com, but she's definitely not an employee because she only works a few hours a week for me, and then she has many other clients. If you're hiring someone full time, you're going to end up with more issues. And if you're hiring, a bunch of people, you really need to establish your presence in that country. Because if you're like, oh, well, I have 40 people who are all independent contractors, that's not going to fly. Should someone ever tip the government off? In the US, if you said, okay, I'm going to offshore to the US, I'm just going to have 40 people that work for me full time, but they are all independent contractors. The US government is not going to go for that. And you're going to owe their back taxes and penalties and all of that jazz. So you really need to be careful on what it is that you're doing.
Interesting. Why is that? Like, let's say your executive admin, let's say she works above 100 hours a month and you have her times 10, and then you're paying them each month. They're really happy with your company and you as a boss, and they're paying their taxes or they're handling their things on their end. Where can you become liable as the boss?
That is a question that's going to be unique for every country. So like I said, if you sitting in Australia wanted to hire someone in the US, there are specific rules, and even hiring one person. So if you hire Bob in Arizona and you set his work hours, you provide him with a computer, you direct him in his work, and he doesn't have any other clients, he's an employee. And as an employee, you're responsible for paying into his Social Security, into his Medicare. You're responsible for withholding his employment taxes. And once you reach a certain number of employees, once you have 30 employees, then you've got to provide health insurance for him. And you sitting in Australia, you don't know what the laws are. I have no clue what the Australian employment laws are. And I mean, the other thing with Bob in Arizona, he becomes an employee if he doesn't meet these qualifications. And then the question is can you pay him a salary or do you have to pay him by the hour? And that depends on what he does. Those rules are very specific within each country. So anytime you're controlling someone's whole day, when they work for you and you alone, I would be very, very wary about going the contractor route. Now, the reality is if no one complains, then the government doesn't know and they don't care. But all it takes is one person to open their mouth and you can be in tremendous trouble. One mistake that a lot of people make is, thinking, oh, all countries' laws are similar or whatever, because they're used to that. You see this a lot with Americans because we're pretty arrogant, that they just don't get that US law doesn't apply to them everywhere they go, and they end up in huge trouble in various places. So you really need to pay attention to those things. And it's not as easy as just, oh, I'm going to open a branch in the Philippines because it's cheaper there.
Interesting. So I've like scaled my team all the way up to like 25 employees from the Philippines, and we scaled back down to 10. So now I have like a nice quality solid team of maybe 10 to 15 people. I haven't really sought any legal counsel. I just pay them more. I make sure they're happy. So make sure on the holidays they can take a day off, and I'll pay them for that holiday, Christmas, and I think there's some specific holidays in the Philippines. But what extra step would you recommend me to take to make sure I don't get into any big trouble?
I would contact an attorney in the Philippines and ask because I have no clue. That might be fine. I have literally no clue. Never been to the Philippines. I would love to go though. I know nothing about Filipino law. You may be 100% fine. And, there's a possibility that you are, but there's a possibility that somebody could report you to the government because you're doing it wrong and you have no clue. It would be worth the money it would cost to speak with an attorney there to find out.
I'm definitely going to do that. I've written that down, and I'm going to put some extra work into it. So future Andy would be grateful. The last topic I want to jump into, Suzanne, is growing a company. So when I went from 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, as we grew the team, definitely the problems I went into was like I did notice that the quality of work did decrease. I did notice that the efficiency of the company did decrease. I did notice I was no longer on top of everyone because there were just too many people. I did notice I was more reliant on the managers that were in place. So if there was a YouTube manager managing 2 editors for the YouTube team, I'll just talk to the manager and I wouldn't be speaking to the editors. But so things got really, really spread out. I guess, what are the main problems companies get into, HR wise, culture wise, employee wise, as they scale?
One of the biggest things that companies get into as they scale is that they think they can have their fun startup culture and just, I don't need to worry about it anymore. This is who we are. We're cool. But like you said, as you get bigger, you're not communicating with every person. As you get bigger, different laws kick in. As you get bigger, you have different dynamics that develop. When you're a startup team of 3, 4 people and you're all besties and you all have the same vision, that's great. But then when you start to hire people that are employees and not partners in your venture, it's a job to them, right? So you're like, oh, I'm going to work 80 hours a week to get this done. And they're like, I'm going to work 35 and that's it. And you're like, why aren't you dedicated? And you're like, well, because I'm not making any money. I mean, I get my paycheck and that's it. You guys go bigger, it doesn't affect me any. I'm not an investor in the company. So they forget how different it is to be an employee versus a founder. And you really do have to keep a tight rein on your culture, and you need to be deliberate about your culture. What do we do here and what do we not do here? And you have to make rules. One of the things I advise people is to have an employee handbook from the moment they hire their first employee, which is utterly ridiculous. Why would I need to develop a dress code when I have one person and I've known her my whole life? And you don't. But that sets it in the standard so that when you hire the second, third, fourth, fifth person, you don't suddenly have someone showing up in booty shorts and now you've got a problem. And now we're going to write a dress code that, says that your butt cheeks can't be hanging out, which never in a million years would you think is a problem until it happens to you. And it does happen to you. And then that person is targeted and, oh, you're just saying this because you sexist person. you're trying to control women's bodies by saying, I can't have my butt cheeks hanging out. But if you have it established before you've hired someone, then, this is the rule. We're not targeting you. It's just always been the rule. And that's a lot easier to do. So many people only make rules and guidelines in response to bad behavior. And that is not the way to go. You need to set up your rules before. And like I said, people think that's ridiculous. I have one employee. Why do I need to have a policy? Well, because if you want to stay at one employee, then you don't, because everything can just be on a ad hoc basis. But if you want to grow, you want to have a policy. We're real casual about vacation days here. Okay, that's great when it's one person or two people. When they're 30 and then you have someone that's taking huge advantage of that, it's much more difficult to pull that person in than it is to establish a boundary to begin with. So make sure you're establishing your boundaries, and you'll probably want, before you scale, to sit down with an HR consultant and develop, how do you want your business to look when you've got 30 employees, when you've got 50 employees, when you've got 100 employees, because it's a very, very different animal when you are bigger than when you are smaller. And group dynamics, man, they're weird. So you want to get a hold of that before you reach that stage. You want to establish the type of culture that we want to be and be very deliberate about it. This is how we operate here. And this is how this is going to look with 5 employees, with 10 employees, with 50 employees. Like you said, when you've got more employees, you can't spend all day talking to everybody in the company. There's no point in having management, and the managers don't take any of your burden off your plate if you're managing everybody. How is that going to look? And you want to think about it before you scale rather than in a panicked reaction. And to be fair, most companies do it in a panic reaction. So that's the normal way to do it. But the effective way to do it is to think about it before you get bigger.
Now, would you be mainly thinking about rules such as no high skirts where your butt cheeks show, and then predict a bunch of rules that may lead to issues? Is that the main thing you'd be focused on, or what can you do prior?
Rules are one thing, but culture is another thing too. And you need to be deliberate about what that means. And so many companies have very different cultures. I mean, do you want this formal culture where everyone is Mr. and Ms. until you get to know each other? Or are you always, hey, I'm Suzanne, or introduce myself as I'm Ms. Lucas? Both are fine. The formal thing is kind of weird in the US, but incredibly common in Switzerland. You don't call someone by your first name until you're friends. So, my neighbor is supposed to call me Frau Lucas until we're friends, right? Which is so weird for an American, because the only people I call, Mr. and Mrs. are school teachers. It's like everybody else is their first name. But that's not how it is here. Again, it's a culture thing. And do you want to be the place where you have a happy hour every Friday? You can be a happy hour company with 500 employees. Absolutely, you can do that. But you want to be deliberate about it and decide, is this the kind of casual place? Is it okay to have a beer at lunch at our company? Which you may think is a ridiculous thing. I'm not telling you to make all of these rules, but think about them and what kind of message that you want to send. And this also helps keep you from having two-tiered kind of employees. And a lot of companies, as they scale, those first people, they're like the inner circle, and they get, well, I get extra vacation because, or I don't have to come in on time, or I can work from home, but you have to go into the office because I'm a founder. Yeah, good for you. If you want to have that culture, fine, have that culture, but it's going to make it an unpleasant place to work for your employees. So think about what you want, how you want to do it, And there's a zillion ways to do it, but you need to choose. And if you can choose deliberately, otherwise, a culture will develop organically, but it may not be the culture that you like, what you want to have. And as you scale as well, people who have the ideas, the type of independent idea people that you want at the beginning of a company, may not make your best managers. As a matter of fact, a lot of founders are crappy managers. They're great at ideas, but not good at managing people. Managing people is a different skill. So as you scale, you have to ask yourself, am I the best person to lead this company? Or should I stay as an idea person and we hire a different CEO? Are these my first people on board? Are they truly the best managers? Or do I need to bring in someone from the outside to manage? If I want to stay as a manager, do I need a coach to teach me how to do this? Should I send my management team to a management class to learn? Management is a skill. Like any skill, you can learn it, but you have to want to learn it. And if you just let it go, people tend to default to what their first manager did. So if your first manager from your job at Burger King was crappy, that's what you're going to default to when you start managing people. So if you don't actively say, this is the type of manager that I want to be, you'll probably end up being a terrible manager. I mean, some people have a natural instinct for it, but for most people, it's a learned skill. So address that.
Now, Suzanne, a year ago, I used to sort of talking about culture. I used to do like weekly team meetings with every single sector, and at the beginning of each meeting, would read through a company culture deck, 5 things that the company values and our core mission, and we'll get an employee to read that. And I'll do that again. I'll do like 15 minutes between 3 or 4 different sectors, and it was like an hour every Monday afternoon. I did that every single week. And then over the last maybe year, I've just threw that out the window. I no more routinely team huddles, weekly meetings. I just jump on a call when an employee needs help, or if there's an issue, I message people if there's an issue. I do check-ins with employees. I just type it like, hey, how's everyone? Send them a voice message. And I've removed all these weekly meetings and all these company culture images. Like I just felt like we were repeating it, but it wasn't being absorbed. And then the new approach was like, okay, I'm not gonna do meetings just because we're doing meetings. I'm gonna do meetings when there's something to solve. I'm gonna check in with employees and always, message send them a personal voice and be like, hey, hey Suzanne, it's been a while, just checking in. I just want to make sure, and just send them a personal message. Act in the way that I'd like my team members, so treat people how I'd like to be treated. And I think I've slowly noticed that the team has been getting molded to people that are similar to me, and the people that aren't similar to me slowly get weeded out, and the culture is just organically being built versus shoving it down their throats through like weekly team huddles. What's your thoughts?
What you say is organic is what I see as a very deliberate decision on your part. I agree. Having a weekly team meeting where we shove culture down the throat doesn't do anything, because it's not actually creating culture. That's trying to create a cult where we just have these things that we all recite. You have plenty of people that can recite, this is our company mission statement, but they don't apply it. It's really how you apply it and how they see you as a leader applying it. If you say, we have a culture of trust here, but you're not a trustworthy person, it doesn't matter how many times you say we have a culture of trust. It's far more your actions. So yeah, I see what you're doing as a deliberate, I'm the CEO who reaches out to people and who looks for this and who looks for that. And I want to have a culture of openness. You can't demand a culture of openness by not being open. Tell me everything that's going on and I will trust you as I yell at you if there's any small mistake. It doesn't matter what your mission statement says. If you're screaming at people for small mistakes, this is not going to be a culture of we're risk takers, right? You actually have to demonstrate that, which can be very, very difficult. It's so easy to write down a statement that, we are a we're a culture of risk takers. That's very popular and necessary in a lot of businesses, right? Because you're not going to grow if you're just everyone's paranoid about things. So we say it, but then everybody gets screamed at for the smallest mistake. That's not your culture. That's some words on a paper.
Makes sense. So my theory is I just have to be the best version of me I can, and I do notice that the inner circle employees slowly, subconsciously pick that up, and then they disseminate that down to the people below them. And it's just a slow and steady, long-term grind. It's not going to be instant, but it's just a slow, and it's going to take years and years because for it to disseminate between a lot of people, it will just take time, right?
Yeah. It takes time and it takes deliberate action at the top. Like you said, it has to come from you. You can't have, that's what when people talk to me about, I'm in this terrible toxic company. I'm like, well, who's toxic? When it's the CEO, there's no fixing it. You just got to leave because that's what it comes down from. It's not going to get better. Toxic people don't generally have enough self-awareness to realize that they're the problem. So your best option is to get the heck out of that type of company. But if you don't want a toxic environment, you have to make sure that you're not toxic. And it also sometimes means having tough conversations with your management team. And it also means not putting up with bad behavior. You ignore the horrible bullying, sexually harassing salesperson because they're really good at sales while they're sexually harassing all of your employees. And so many companies do this, and you see it. My big favorite bad example was our good pal Matt Lauer at NBC in the US, who was apparently sexually harassing people for years, but because he was the star of the show, everybody ignored it until they couldn't anymore. And you get this tremendous turnover, and it's absolutely terrible, 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 terrible for your business to allow that. So you have to have this policy of it doesn't matter how high up you are, if you're not doing what we want to do as a company, if you're not exemplifying the culture that we want to have, you're out of here. And that can be really hard, especially when you start out by hiring your friends, as a lot of companies do.
Last topic that I've been dealing with, I know I said last topic again, but something just popped into my mind, Suzanne. I've been dealing with two types of employees. Type 1 are the type of people where they're really good at their job. I ask them to do something, they get it done straight away. I ask them for a small tweak, they totally instantly understand what that small tweak is I'm asking for. They're able to apply that job, but then they're more distant, they're sort of more independent, they take a while to respond to me, and I guess they have a bubble around them for some reason. I can't seem to connect with them. On the other hand, there are employees that are really open, but they seem to be much, much more slower. Like I have to constantly keep giving them feedback. Like they might make the same mistake 2 or 3 times, but after the third time, they'll learn from the mistake. But I'm not really happy because the other employee, if they make a mistake, they learn from it. I call it out. I'm not going to see that mistake again. But these people, they're like really bubbly. They're like, Andy, I'm super sorry. They're always communicating with me, and they're there, but like I can see these people would want to stick with me long term, but they're just much more slower. Whereas these people, they're sort of more independent, but I can see them always wanting raises, wanting to move up the company, maybe being like, hey, I saw this other opportunity here. What are you going to do, Andy? It's like, oh, you're sort of threatening me right now, type of thing. But you sort of do your job really, really well, and I can't really complain, type of thing. And then obviously there's people who are a mix of both, which are really, really rare. Like I only have 1 or 2 team members that are both able to pick up mistakes, fix it straight away. They're also on top of things and they reply to me and they really appreciate me as a leader. And they have both qualities, and I guess I want more of those people, but they're hard to find.
It is hard to find, and you have to decide what is best for you. A lot of companies only want to hire those type A people who are on top of everything and who want to climb the corporate ladder. But in the real world, there's only so many people that can go up those rungs. And so if you've hired everybody that just really wants the promotion, the raise, the this right now, right now, right now, what you end up is a lot of infighting. You
Mm,
need people to do the work. And there's a lot of people out there that are great workers who maybe need a little bit more of a push and need a little bit more guidance. But you'll get that loyalty and long-term commitment, and you'll have someone in the same job for several years instead of,
mm,
begging for a promotion after 6 months. You can't grow a company if everybody wants to be promoted every 6 months.
mm,
So it really depends on what you want to do. One thing that I like to remind companies of is that they're average. Your company's an average company. Sorry, it's what it is. It's not the best thing ever. It's not the new, latest, greatest, whatever. It's an average company. And average companies need average employees in order to function. And that's not bad. Most of us are average. I feel pretty confident in saying you're average. I'm average. We're average people. We're not that top 1%. And people are like, oh, but my IQ is top 1%. That doesn't mean you're a top 1% employee. It doesn't mean you're a top 1% business person. Your grades don't have anything to do with that. It's a different skill set. And how do I measure that? Well, as I said, I always quite confident in telling companies that they're average because that's the definition, right? You're in that whole bell curve. You're in that middle section. You're not in that top percent. And your employees are also in that middle section. And a lot of companies just want to target those people at that top end. But those people at that top end know instinctively that they're at that top end, and they want to move up. So they're going to come and they're going to work for you, and they're going to glean whatever they can from you, and then they're going to move on. And that's fine. Those people are fine, but that's going to be really hard for you to grow your business. So I don't have a problem with employees that need a couple of rounds of instruction to learn something, as long as they learn it eventually, because then once they've learned it, they're able to go forth and do that job. But again, it depends on what you need in the moment, and those things change as you scale as well. When you have 5 employees, everybody needs to be at the top of their game all of the time. When you have 50 employees, you do have that luxury of being able to have the people that are still in a training mode. When you've got 10,000 employees, you've got people at all different levels.
makes sense. So, for example, one of those employees would be a person who helps me edit one of my TikToks. And the TikTok algorithm keeps changing, you're constantly having to be better. And I feel like I'm constantly having to be like, hey, maybe we should try this. Hey, maybe we could improve that. And then once she does those things, 6 months later, TikTok algorithm, I have to come in again. And it feels like I'm basically the TikTok editor at this point. And I'm no longer being able to be the CEO's work, because I'm constantly having to tweak and train up this employee, even though it's their full-time job and they should be able to constantly improve. But it's a bit hard to expect them to do that as well.
Does she know that you want her to do that? Because she may think he told me to do it this way, and
Yeah.
so I'm going to do it this way until he tells me to change. Is it clear to her that you want her to follow TikTok trends, TikTok algorithm changes? Because you're right. I mean, I don't know squat about TikTok, but I do know a lot about LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and those algorithms change all of the time. And it takes me time to catch up with an algorithm change. I'll notice on my that my views on my LinkedIn will drop, and then I got to figure out what the new trend is and capture that. The same on Facebook. We were noticing that posts on the Facebook group were getting fewer and fewer views, and so I sat down with my moderation team and we're like, okay, what do we do? And how do we fix this? Because they don't announce, oh, we've made a change to the algorithm, here's the way to beat it. They just do it and you got to figure it out. And, there's always people writing about it, but it takes those people a while to figure out what the new change is as well. She may not know that you want her to do that. You may not have been clear. It's in your mind. Of course, the idea is to maximize the views on TikTok. And if we're not getting the maximum views, then we got to change it. She may be thinking, oh, well, this is how he wants me to do it. There's got to be changes.
Suzanne, where can people find more about what you do, hear more about, follow your journey? What's the best place for our audience to get in touch with you?
If you Google Evil HR Lady, I will pop up. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Suzanne Lucas. And if you are an HR professional, you can join my HR group on Facebook, which is called Evil HR Lady. And you have to answer the questions, which includes putting the number 7 in the last question.
Thank you very much for your time today, Suzanne. I had a lot of fun. I can tell how direct, straight to the point, no BS. You are definitely passionate about culture, HR recruiting. It definitely, I can feel that through the camera, and I definitely appreciated your time today.
It was lovely to meet you, and now you can quit working for the day and I can get started working.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. So yeah, that is another episode of the podcast. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Please drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Please give us a review on Spotify and iTunes. If you do that, I'd really appreciate that. I'm going to be reading out all the reviews each week. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. See you guys. Peace.